They say life is a series of choices, each leading us down a different path. Well, my choices have certainly led me to an interesting place. My name is Laura, and up until recently, I thought I had it all figured out. A charming boyfriend named Daniel, a cozy apartment in the city, and a social life that kept me buzzing like a caffeinated hummingbird. Daniel works at a prestigious law firm downtown. Tall, sharp-dressed, and sharper-witted, he's everything you might expect from a rising star in the legal world. Our life together was the picture of domestic bliss, or so it seemed from the outside. We hosted dinner parties, attended charity galas, and took weekend trips to wine country. Picture perfect, right? But beneath the veneer of our idyllic life, I felt an itch. Not a literal one, let's not get ahead of ourselves, but a restless urge for something more exciting. Daniel was wonderful, but his world was so structured, so predictable. I craved spontaneity, adventure, maybe even a little mischief. It all started innocently enough. I attended one of Daniel's office parties, a swanky affair with overpriced champagne and conversations about mergers and acquisitions. I was dressed to impress in a sleek black dress that hugged my curves just right. Daniel was busy networking, so I found myself wandering around the room, feigning interest in abstract art pieces hanging on the walls. That's when Marcus approached me. He had a glass of whiskey in hand and a smirk that could melt ice. Admiring the artistic merits of corporate decor, he quipped, nodding toward a particularly perplexing painting. I laughed, grateful for the distraction. Trying to figure out if it's supposed to be a landscape or someone's emotional breakdown, I replied. Maybe both, he said, eyes glinting mischievously. Art imitates life, after all. We slipped into easy conversation, his dry wit a refreshing change from the stiff formalities of the evening. He told me about his latest case, a property dispute that was more soap opera than legal matter, and I shared exaggerated stories about my own work in event planning. As the night wore on, the crowd thinned, and we found ourselves tucked away in a quiet corner. The air between us crackled with unspoken possibilities. Just as I was about to suggest we rejoin the party, he leaned in slightly. You know, he murmured, this evening just got a lot more interesting. How so? I asked, feigning innocence. He held my gaze. Let's just say I didn't expect to find the most fascinating conversation at a corporate shindig. Before we could delve any deeper, Daniel appeared at my side, wrapping an arm around my waist. There you are, he said, oblivious to the undercurrents. Marcus, I see you've met Laura. Indeed, Marcus replied smoothly. You're a lucky man, Daniel. Daniel chuckled, completely missing the subtext. Don't I know it? As we left the party, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The next day, when I received a text from an unknown number, couldn't stop thinking about our conversation last night. I knew exactly who it was. One coffee led to another, each meeting cloaked in layers of secrecy. We'd meet in out-of-the-way cafes, share whispered conversations, and part ways with lingering glances. The first time we crossed the line was in a dimly lit jazz bar, the music providing a sultry backdrop to a moment that felt inevitable. The thrill was intoxicating. Sneaking around, stolen glances at office functions, whispered conversations that could change everything if overheard. It was as if I had tapped into a side of myself that had been dormant, and I wasn't about to let it go back to sleep. Then there was Alex, another colleague of Daniel's. A few weeks after the party, I visited Daniel's office to drop off some forgotten documents. The receptionist waved me through, accustomed to my occasional appearances. As I navigated the maze of cubicles, I noticed Alex hunched over his desk, his brow furrowed in concentration. Burning the midnight oil? I asked, startling him. He looked up, surprised. Laura, isn't it? Daniel's partner. Guilty as charged, I replied. Forgot to give Daniel these this morning. He's in a meeting, Alex said, gesturing toward a closed conference room door. I shrugged. Figures. Mind if I leave them on his desk? Go ahead, he said, eyes already returning to his screen. As I placed the documents on Daniel's desk, I couldn't help but feel a pull to engage Alex further. There was something intriguing about his intensity. On my way out, I paused by his desk again. "You look like you're solving the world's problems over there." He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Just trying to make sense of this mess before the deadline." "Maybe a fresh pair of eyes would help," I offered impulsively. He glanced at me skeptically, but then slid a stack of papers in my direction. "Be my guest." What started as a casual offer turned into a 2-hour deep dive into legal jargon and spreadsheets. To my surprise, I found the challenge exhilarating. By the end of it, we had cracked the issue, and he looked at me with newfound respect. "You're full of surprises," he said, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. "Don't tell Daniel," I teased. "He still thinks I can't balance a checkbook." Over the next few weeks, we found reasons to meet, sometimes under the guise of needing my insight, other times just to escape the confines of our routines. Our connection was more cerebral, built on shared secrets and intellectual sparring. When we finally crossed the line, it was in his office after hours, the glow of city lights framing a moment that felt both wrong and undeniably right. And then came Sophia. Yes, you read that right, a woman. She was a consultant brought in for a major case Daniel's firm was handling. Our paths crossed at a networking event I attended on a whim. She was on stage, delivering a keynote speech about innovation in business practices. Her confidence was magnetic, and her ideas were revolutionary. After her presentation, I found myself gravitating toward her. "That was an incredible talk," I said, extending my hand. "I'm Laura." "Sophia," she replied, her grip firm. "Glad you enjoyed it." We chatted about her work, and I confessed that I found her perspective refreshing. She tilted her head, studying me. "You know, it's rare to find someone who gets it," she said thoughtfully. "We should continue this conversation over coffee." Our coffee turned into a 3-hour discussion that spanned everything from philosophy to favorite films. She was intoxicating, sharp, passionate, and unafraid to challenge me. One afternoon, as we strolled through an art gallery, she paused in front of a painting of a stormy sea. "This one speaks to me," she said softly. "Why's that?" I asked. "It captures chaos and beauty all at once," she replied, her eyes never leaving the canvas. "Much like life." I looked at her, sensing layers beneath her composed exterior. "I think I know what you mean." She turned to face me, a subtle smile playing on her lips. "Do you?" The air between us thickened, and in that moment I knew crossing this line would be different. Our affair was perhaps the most clandestine of all. Meeting in hidden corners of the city, exchanging notes hidden in books, it was like something out of a spy novel. The layers of secrecy were as thick as the tension between us. All the while, Daniel remained blissfully unaware. Or so I thought. Our life continued as normal as it could be, with me leading a double, or rather triple, life. I didn't feel guilty. Instead, I felt alive. However, life has a way of unraveling even the most carefully woven webs. Small inconsistencies began to pile up. Daniel started to notice my absences, the unexplained errands, the late-night meetings that didn't quite add up. I brushed off his concerns, attributing them to stress or miscommunication. One day, he mentioned that Marcus had been acting strangely at work. "Have you noticed anything odd about him?" he asked casually over dinner. I nearly choked on my wine but recovered quickly. "Not that I can think of." "Why?" "Just seems distracted lately," he mused. "Probably nothing." I nodded, forcing a smile. "I'm sure it's just work stress." But his gaze lingered on me a moment longer than usual, and I felt a flicker of unease. As the weeks passed, Daniel became more attentive, almost as if he were studying me. He suggested a weekend getaway to a cabin in the woods, framing it as a chance to reconnect. Part of me wondered if he suspected anything, but I pushed the thought aside. When we arrived, the cabin was quaint, nestled among towering pines and overlooking a serene lake. It was picturesque, almost too perfect. The first night was uneventful, filled with wine and casual conversation. But on the second night, things took a turn. Daniel proposed a game treasure hunt of sorts. Always one for surprises, I went along with it. He handed me a series of envelopes, each containing clues leading to different spots around the property. The first led me to a tree with our initials carved into it, a sweet touch. The second brought me to a picnic blanket laid out under the stars. But the third clue was different. It led me back to the cabin, specifically to a locked room I hadn't noticed before. Inside, I found a table with neatly arranged items, photographs of me with Marcus, text message printouts with Alex, and even a napkin with Sophia's lipstick stain. My heart pounded as realization washed over me. Daniel knew. He had known for who knows how long. I turned to find him standing in the doorway, a calm expression on his face that was more unsettling than any outburst could have been. He began to speak, not in anger, but with a measured tone that sliced through me. He laid out everything how he had suspected, the evidence he had gathered, even how he had orchestrated certain meetings to confirm his suspicions. It was a masterclass in meticulous planning, and I was the unwitting subject. Then came the twist of the knife. Daniel revealed that he had already spoken to Marcus, Alex, and Sophia. Each of them had been confronted and had, in their own ways, agreed to sever ties. Not only that, but Daniel had ensured that any professional repercussions would fall squarely on them. Marcus was being transferred to a remote branch, Alex was under review for misconduct, and Sophia's consultancy contract had been terminated. As for me, Daniel had one final surprise. He handed me a folder containing legal documents, evidence of my infidelities that could be used to tarnish my reputation should I choose to contest any of his terms. He was ending our relationship, but not before securing his own position and leaving me with nothing. I was stunned, speechless for perhaps the first time in my life. The man I thought I knew had outmaneuvered me at every turn, and now I was left standing in the ruins of my own making. In the weeks that followed, the full weight of what had happened began to sink in. Friends we'd shared turned cold, invitations dried up, and whispers followed me wherever I went. Daniel had managed not only to extract himself from our relationship unscathed, but to cast me in the role of the villain in our social circle. The irony isn't lost on me. I had sought excitement, adventure, a break from the mundane. And now I had more drama than I ever bargained for. Looking back, do I regret it? Perhaps I regret underestimating Daniel. I regret losing control of the narrative. But part of me still thrills at the memories, the moments when I felt truly alive. Maybe that's my flaw, or perhaps it's just who I am. Now, I navigate a world that's become a maze of closed doors and sidelong glances. The thrill is gone, replaced by a stark reality that I hadn't anticipated. Daniel, meanwhile, continues to climb the ladder, his reputation untarnished, his life seemingly unaffected. I suppose he got the last word, orchestrating a revenge that was as elegant as it was devastating. And here I am, left to pick up the pieces, wondering where I go from here. They say you reap what you sow. If that's true, then my harvest has been a bitter one. But if I'm honest, a part of me is already looking for the next adventure, the next spark to ignite the fire within. After all, life is a series of choices, and I've never been one to play it safe.